This is John 10, by the way. It's verses 10 through 21. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. So, when you think about the sheep pen, this isn't, steel fencing or anything that we're familiar with. This is a mound of rocks, okay? Lots of rocks in the Middle East and in Israel. They pile up rocks to make a fence, and they called it a fence. At least that's the closest translation we would have. So these rock walls of stacked rocks are what contain the sheep in the sheep pen. And the gate is nothing that swings. The gate is a place in the rocks that they open up the walls. So if they open the gate, they're going to take the rocks from this one area and they're going to restack them aside to create an opening in the rock wall. That's the gate. And the gatekeeper would be responsible for stacking the rocks to close the gate or unstacking the rocks to open the gate that the sheep are contained in. So it's a little different imagery when you understand what this gate looks like. It's just a pile of rocks, and when it is closed, it blends into the rest of the rock wall. So the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. Now, I know nothing about sheep other than what I've learned in the Bible and the things that I have read around the Bible, helping to explain them. But there can be a huge flock of sheep that are intermingled flocks, smaller flocks. And the sheep know the shepherd's voice so that he can walk into that pen, and there may be 4 or 5 different flocks of sheep in that pen, and only the sheep that know his voice will follow him out of the pen. Isn't that amazing? These sheep know the voice of their master, and so they don't need a sheepdog or anything. Those sheep follow the master right out of the pen because they know his voice. Who's the sheep? We're the sheep, right? Who's the shepherd? Jesus is a shepherd, right? So, we'll keep this whole illustration Jesus is going. We have to keep in mind who each of the players are. But they will never follow a stranger, it says in verse 5. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Why wouldn't the Pharisees understand what he was talking about? You know, I've thought about that quite a bit. I think there's 2 basic reasons. One is they just don't get the connection. They don't understand that Jesus' sheep are us, right? They don't get that piece of it. And they certainly don't understand that Jesus himself is the shepherd. So that analogy there, they're just missing that altogether. But there's another reason. They're not shepherds themselves, right? They've never spent any time in the fields. I can assure you the Pharisees never stacked rocks or unstacked them to open the gate, because the Pharisees were the elite of the elite. They were the highest in the land. They were the most privileged people around. And the shepherds, they were the lowliest of the low. When you look at the pecking order of ancient Israel, you're going to find out Pharisees on top, shepherds on the very bottom. Now, isn't it fascinating that Jesus chose to be associated with what? The shepherds, the lowliest of the lowly, not with the Pharisees, who were the highest of the high. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. All right, so who are the players again? Let's go over the players. We've got the sheep. Who's that? It's us, right? We've got the shepherd. Who's that? It's Jesus. He's also known as the gate, right? So in this passage, we hear him referred to as both the gate and as the shepherd. So who's the hired hand? Any ideas? That would be me. Me and the Pharisees. Yeah, we're the hired hands. Now, isn't it interesting that Jesus refers to them as the hired hands? We're not the shepherd. Have you heard of a pastor referred to as a shepherd? We're not the shepherd. Who's the shepherd? Jesus is a shepherd. We're merely the hired hands, or the pastors, okay? So the Pharisees were supposed to be the pastors of their day, like I'm supposed to be the pastor. Now listen what Jesus has to say about the hired hand. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. And then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The person runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Have I mentioned lately how much I love you? He's talking about the Pharisees, right? But he's talking about pastors in general. We are a timid bunch, right? When we're faced with evil, what's the tendency to do? It's the same thing you would do, by the way, if you're faced with evil. You probably turn tail and run. Does a good shepherd turn tail and run? No. What's Jesus saying here? If you're going to rely on somebody, don't rely on the pastor. Rely on Christ himself. He's the only one that can face down what is going to come in your life. The only one. It's just Jesus. It isn't me. It isn't the person sitting next to you. It isn't the government. It's not the mayor, right? Or anybody like that. It's just Jesus. He's the only one. Only one that can stand and face down the troubles that we will have in our life. Jesus goes on in verse 14 to say, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. You know him? It's kind of important that you do. You got to know him. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. Same connection, right? That connection between Christ and God is the same connection that's supposed to be between us and Jesus. And I laid down my life for the sheep. Now here's a really important passage I'm about to read in verse 16. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I have other sheep who are not of this sheep pen. For you and for me, that passage is absolutely essential. You know why? Who was Jesus talking to when he's giving this sermon? He was talking to the Jews. And if it weren't for this passage right here that includes all those who are not Jews, they're the only ones that would have been saved. And in fact, the Jews at the time believed they were the only ones that would be saved. We've got a few denominations around right now that think that too, don't they? Yeah. But Jesus made it clear that there are others beyond the Jews. Others who are not of this sheep pen. And that's us, folks. It's everything to know that we get to be included in those who get saved. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. We call ourselves Christians, right? We may call ourselves covenanters or however that comes down. And the people down the road might call themselves Lutherans, and there's people up in the valley and other places that call themselves Catholics, right? There's some Baptists around. We've got all kinds of different names for us. And Jesus considers us all to be one flock. Isn't that something? One flock. One flock. One shepherd. The reason my Father, I'm in verse 17 now, the reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? Some of you may say that about me. I don't know. But others said, these are not the sayings of a person possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? You know what that passage is referring to? It's referring to the miracles that all these people have seen Jesus do. And in fact, at one point in the scriptures, Jesus even says, if you don't believe what I say to you, can't you at least believe based on the miracles that you've seen me do? That's my translation, but yeah. The miracles mean something and help give credibility to the power and love of Jesus the Christ. So today we're talking about the shepherding ministry of Jesus. We are supposed to participate in the ministries of Jesus, right? So I believe that Jesus' ministries go on. He demonstrated what those ministries were like when he was flesh and blood walking this earth like we are now. He demonstrated what those ministries were supposed to be like. And he demonstrated that so that we would emulate him, right? So that we would do what he did. So, we're talking about the shepherding ministry of Jesus, and that is a ministry that we are supposed to be involved in also. Now, there are a lot of images of shepherds in the Bible. over 100 references to shepherds in the Bible. Jesus refers to himself as not just the shepherd, but as the good shepherd. Why do you suppose shepherds are constantly referred to in the Bible? Why do you suppose this image was one chosen by God himself to talk to people? And I already gave you one reason, right? Shepherds were the lowest of the low. So if we're going to learn something from Jesus, we learn that we participate in ministries not as an overlord, not as a power play. We do it from the lowest, most humble point that we can find. That's how we do ministry. That's how we do the shepherding ministry that Jesus did. Now, the 23rd Psalm, I want to use the 23rd Psalm as an illustration of this. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And my eyesight is so terrible, I have to keep raising this up because I can't read my own writing anymore. Now, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, verse 1 of the 23rd Psalm. We are his people, right? When we say we lack nothing, it means that we are content. And we are content because the Lord's our shepherd. And he chose us, right? We didn't choose him. He chose us. And therefore, we are content because we lack nothing. Second verse, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside, this translation says, quiet waters. We're used to the language still waters. It's still peaceful to think about, right? You see, Jesus isn't a passive shepherd. He is an active shepherd. The verse uses the word makes me lie down in green pasture, leads me beside quiet waters. We're talking about active verbs here, right? Because Jesus is active. He takes us to the desired places. He allows us to rest. He doesn't just allow us to rest. He commands us to rest. Have you ever been in a situation where you're overdoing it? You know, maybe you've got an injury. Maybe you have just spent yourself when you were young and your mother said, you need to lie down for a while. That's what Jesus does. It's exactly what he does. Because he knows everything we need. Everything we need. Including the rest that we need. Including the peace that we need. Including the tranquility that we need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And he leads me beside still waters. Verse 3, he refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Why would he do that? Here's a couple more of those active verbs I was talking about. He refreshes and he guides. Why would he do that? It's simply because he is faithful. In his faithfulness, he has claimed responsibility for us. You know that? Jesus considers himself responsible for us. He was given that charge by his Father, and he told us that. He's responsible for us. That's why he refreshes our soul. That's why he guides me along the right paths. Verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valley, and we know the language, valley of the shadow of death, right? Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This is a promise that says God walks with us, doesn't he? He walks with us. He walks with us during the good times. He walks with us during the bad times. And we're not supposed to be living in fear because we know that he is there. We are comforted by His presence. One of the things that there are dozens and dozens of books for pastors out there that talk about how to be a comforting presence. You know, most of the time, when you're a comforting presence, you don't say much. Maybe you don't say anything. You may be, when family is being greeted at the funeral home, you just kind of hover in the corner. But you're there. We met with some former parishioners when we were on our vacation. The last few weeks, Rhonda put a thing on Facebook, said, we're going to be at this place at this hour if anybody wants to come find us. And we were shocked at the people that wanted to come find us. Kind of humbling. One of the women that was there, when her husband died, he was not my parishioner, okay? He had attended a different church, and so the pastor of that church did the funeral and what have you. But because it was her husband, I was there. I was just there. I prayed with her maybe once, but I hung around for a long time at the funeral home when she was crying and greeting people. I was just there. And you know what she remembers about all of that? She remembers that I was there. And she had to come tell me when we were in Indiana that that was the thing she appreciated the most, is that I was there. We can't begin to estimate how important it is for our presence. Our presence is critically important. And it doesn't just apply to pastors. None of this stuff we're talking about today just applies to pastors. So God walks with us during the good and the bad times, and we have no reason to fear. He guides us with His rod and His staff. Now, when we think about the shepherd, what's the rod and staff for? Do you have any idea? Why does a shepherd carry a rod? And why does a shepherd carry a staff? They're to keep the sheep in line, right? That's all it's about. They are guidance tools and they are disciplinary tools. In my house when I was growing up, there was a paddle, a wooden paddle that my dad made, hanging on the wall, and it had all four of us kids' names on it. And I can assure you that it was used once in a while. Yeah. And we never forgot it was there because it was prominently displayed in our house when I was growing up. Did you know that children who are given limits and who are disciplined feel more loved than children who don't receive that? Did you know that? Yeah. We're not doing our kids any favors by letting them do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, right? By saying, going and yelling at the teacher when the child got in trouble. My mother always told me that if I got in trouble at school, you better know, Buster, you're in trouble at home too. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. I always knew my mother loved me because she set limits for me and because she disciplined me. And what do you suppose the rod and the staff are for? God loves His children, doesn't He? Loves us. Bigger than any love I can ever express for you, for me, is the love of God. Way bigger. Huge. Mountainous. Overwhelming love. And with love comes guidance and discipline. That's how it works. The rod and the staff, they comfort me. Not an obvious connection at all. But it's how it works. Verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. We are marked as His people. We are set aside as His people. It's a victory, isn't it? To be counted among those that he considers to be his sheep. And it deserves a celebration. My cup overflows. That's celebration. And the final verse, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Surely means we are confident, because God is faithful, because Christ is faithful. We're not only confident that God is with us always when we live in this world, but we are confident that we get to spend eternity with him. Confident. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that was the introduction to this sermon. Believe it or not, I've only got 2.5 more pages. You know what? I think maybe we'll finish this up next week. Is that okay? I might just do that. I want to continue to talk about the shepherding ministry of Jesus and how we are supposed to be participating in that, okay? And ways that we can participate in that. And that's what the rest of this is about for next week. God bless.